White's pilgrimage, and we'll get to hear about that when she comes back. I want to start by thanking you for your patience and understanding with me coming in a little bit late, coming in directly from work and the disruption that might have been for you as I entered the Zendo, so thank you. If you've heard me talk before, you might know I like to name my talks. I think it can be fun to name our talks. And as I was working to try and name this one, I realized this is really going to be a work in progress. This is going to be a subject I hope and plan to return to again and again for maybe the rest of my life. So for right now, this talk is something like childcare as engaged practice, as liberatory practice. And I wanted some kind of subtitle in there that was reclaiming the 3 R's of, what are the 3 R's? Reading, writing, and arithmetic? Like yes. We need new 3 R's. And so I actually have 4 for right now for this like temporary position of the title of this talk. And that is resistance, reconciliation, and right relationship. And I'll explore those, I hope, all of them in the next 20, 30 minutes. I'm going to be pulling on some threads today, inviting us to deconstruct a little bit, to decolonize a little bit, to look at our position and our views and the constructs we're holding and see if we might take it apart a little bit. Where are my books? Here they are. I want to start with, this is what some of us have been invited, Erica and Marilyn and I have been invited by Krista to talk on this book, Pieces Every Step by Thich Nhat Hanh. And if you don't know this one, it's highly recommend. Beautiful, graceful teachings by Thich Nhat Hanh. And I'm going to start us, if you do have the book at home maybe, it's page 20. And this is a little excerpt called The Cookie of Childhood. When I was 4 years old, my mother used to bring me a cookie every time she came home from the market. I always went to the front yard and took my time eating it, sometimes half an hour or 45 minutes for one cookie. I would take a small bite and look at the sky. Then I would touch the dog with my feet and take another bite. I just enjoyed being there with the sky, the earth, the bamboo thickets, the cat, the dog, the flowers. I didn't think of the future. I did not regret the past. I was entirely in the present moment with my cookie, the dog, the bamboo, and everything. Maybe you have the impression that you have lost the cookie of your childhood, but I am sure it is still there somewhere in your heart. Everything is still there, and if you really want it, you can find it. The present moment is filled with joy and happiness. If you're attentive, you will see it. If you're attentive, you will see it. And if you keep reading in this book, you'll come to another place where Thich Nhat Hanh says, and once they're seeing, there must be acting. If you know his work, this engaged practice, so we have to get up and act. But what I thought we could do for just a second here, I wanted to invite us into a little Zazen body, just to come in, come back. And maybe there's some memory that you have, something that comes to mind as you enter in to your somatic experience, your Zazen body. Some time when you were there with the cat or the dog or the bamboo, with someone you care about, or some nourishing treat or food. Maybe there's a smell or a taste, an image of a person who cared for you. Maybe it's something from nature, this cookie of your childhood. And just let it be known to yourself, to your whole being, to your body and mind. This direct experience. This child's capacity to be fully present in the suchness, in the direct experience without the constructs, just there, receiving. We can come back into the shared space as you're ready. But just being with it, allowing that feeling to be here today, if you're able to access it, what it was. I feel like this is part of the magic of Thich Nhat Hanh's teachings. The brilliance of it is it's so simple, and there's something so accessible here, but it's still so profound. He's reminding us the cookie of our childhood is worth tasting and possibly very nourishing. And I want to talk a little bit about my particular location, my positionality, because I'm talking about families and I'm talking about children, and it may be that just when you hear those words, when we hear those words, family or children, that certain images come to mind, or certain feelings come to mind. Or maybe the image that came during our little guided practice just now is something challenging, is something difficult that came forward. The image that comes to my mind when I say family or children is often like the stick figure house that kids draw. It's like rectangles with a triangle roof, and there's just the lines of the house, and then maybe the stick figure family, and it's a mom and a dad, and it's 2 kids and a dog and a cat maybe, right? And that's what I want to pull apart right now. I want to pull it apart first by talking about my own lived experience. And it feels tender, it feels hard to talk about. So I'm a mother. I've been self-partnered for the last 10 years. I raised my daughter alone. So what I'm doing by pulling on this thread is acknowledging the different ways that families can look. I'll say in my own experience, I have been impacted by cis heteropatriarchy in the way that our culture often assumes that there's 2 people there to do the work of raising children. Usually one of them is a man. It's not the case for my family, and maybe that wasn't the case for yours either. That there's enough resources to do all that work, to pick up and drop off and go to lessons, to do all the emotional labor, to still make the meals, to do the laundry. That wasn't the case for my family. We struggled. It was difficult. Just one of me. And maybe your family is just you in some kind of radical self-partnership with yourself. Right? Maybe your family doesn't include children that came from your body or that you adopted. Maybe your relationship is with the whole world. Maybe what you're caring for is something much more vast. And I hope that that is a beautiful relationship, and that you will continue, as I'm trying to do also as a self-partnered person, to model that this is a perfectly acceptable and profound way to engage the world with the whole of the world as who we consider our children, who we're in relationship with. So we're disrupting this culture's pronatal narrative and finding wholeness in other expressions of caregiving as family, as all our relations. So this is what I'm trying to pull apart, is family, not as the stick figure house, but about breaking this frame into something bigger so that we're caring for the collective body of our descendants as we take our seats as future ancestors. I want to say a little bit around a little bit more maybe just here in my positionality, like where I am as a self-partnered person trying to deconstruct the frame of what it is to be a family. It feels like this takes a deep commitment to stay, to not turn away, but to really enter our practice of patience and forbearance of falling down and getting back up again. It feels to me like this is a place where this turning towards where sometimes we can forget that that's hard for people to do. So I want to acknowledge that in our practice we often say like that the thing that we're trying to heal might just be facing the avoided pain. The healing we're looking for might just come from facing the avoided pain. And that's not easy for all of us to do. It's harder for some people than for others. Most recently in my own parenting journey, my daughter turned 18 last year. And there was so much grief for me coming in those few months before her 18th birthday. It was like the end of childhood is here. How did we get here? So much grief at this period, this precious period of time that was coming to a close. And then she just turned 19 last month, and now there's a shift. We're settling into a different way of relating to one another, and I feel like there's a bloom. Like I'm already getting a felt sense of what it's like now, what it might be like going forward. She's in Japan right now on the other side of the world practically, so it's been brilliant to watch her go forward and learn and love and travel and be herself. I have a great sense of joy, real mudita, joy in her joy from her being out there doing what she loves. But I want to address like how it was to really grieve that end of childhood, right? And to not pass that by. And it feels to me like so often in this culture we want to skip that part too, right? We want to get past the grief. And you might notice I say grief, your body might contract. I feel it in my stomach sometimes immediately. Just the word grief is like, oh, I want to resist that. But by entering into this difficult place, by turning towards that difficulty, that great pain, that it was generative, right? That grief is generative. Something can come out of entering the process completely. And what has happened, what I've noticed is that there's been a sense of, it's like my soul or my spirit, and soul is a Buddhist problematic word, but there's a sense of my spirit coming back to me, like pouring back in, that there's something here that feels full. Like all the parts of me that needed to be attending to another person for so long, I can put some of that down now. And in that space, there's something else that is arising, that's coming forward. And it's a childlike part. It's a part of me that wants to put my hands in mud and stand in the rain and just be silly and engage life and run, right? There's an exuberance in it, a sense of coming to the fullness of the measure. And it's not because I was ignoring that part. I've been looking at this last year. It's not because I've been ignoring this part. It's actually because I've been, to use Thich Nhat Hanh's language, like inviting it out to play, inviting my child parts out to play. Right? To, as Thich Nhat Hanh says, like invite that child to climb the mountain with you when you go for a walk. Invite that child to walk with you. And it's through that practice, like returning to the cookie of my childhood, that part feels full now. It feels whole. And that it has expression. And this, I want to say, back to the deconstructing, is not just from caring for my child, it's entering into my work. I think most of you know, some of you know, I've run family programs for San Francisco Zen Center for the last decade. I'm a marriage and family therapist. I ran a nonprofit that put programs in schools around the Bay Area for the last decade. So expanding my sense of childcare, expanding our sense of childcare is one of the things I'm inviting us into today. It's something that has supported me in that, this extending the circle of family to all our relations. As a teaching from Thich Nhat Hanh, on one of the doors, he calls this one of the doors of liberation, is signlessness. Signlessness. I'll read this little bit here. He says, our dualistic notions, such as birth and death, being and non-being, sameness and otherness, coming and going, are the foundations of afflictions. He says, meditating on the doors of liberation help us throw away these notions. These doors of liberation, he names 3: emptiness, signlessness, and aimlessness. So just to come on signlessness right now. He says, contemplating these truths can liberate us from fear and suffering. There are doorways to freedom. So a sign, he writes, marks the appearance of something in its form. We recognize things based on their sign, but we're often fooled by the outer form of things. The Buddha said, where there is a sign, there is deception. And then he goes on in this little bit here. You might know this part of his teaching. It comes up in his writing very often, in his talks very often. He talks about how the cloud never dies, and that we may be looking up and we see our little cloud and it's changing its shape and its form, and finally it dissipates. And then maybe we just feel heartbroken, our cloud is gone. Where did it go? But when we're practicing to see with these eyes of mindfulness, of practice, that the cloud isn't gone, it can't be gone, it's just changed shape, it's just changed form. It's here in the paper, it's in our tea. And this is my invitation to us of how we care for children. Can we see the faces of children as all our children? Can we see the faces of children in children that aren't just our own? It's a practice that really supported me. Some of you know I had a child who died 12 years ago. And this teaching has been there for me. It has been one of the things that's carried me through. It's like, can I see his face in the children that I'm serving at Green Gulch Farm, at Zen Center, in my work, in schools? It's not just my child, but can I open that up and see all children, this collective body of the next generation arising? Those are our descendants. So signlessness. So perhaps then the question becomes, can we support one another to practice with signlessness so that we see all children as our children, and so that we take our seat as good ancestors to the collective body of descendants? So can we embody our understanding of interbeing, of interdependent co-arising? Thich Nhat Hanh's lineage really centers practicing with children, family practice, and valuing the wisdom of children. And there's a couple little examples I wanted to give from this book. One is very brief. If you have the book, it's on page 23. He says, a few years ago, I asked some children, what is the purpose of eating breakfast? One boy replied, to get energy for the day. Another said, the purpose of eating breakfast is to eat breakfast. I think the second child is more correct. The purpose of eating is to eat. The purpose of sitting is to sit. And kids know this. You know, sometimes we have these like little moments where their gems come forward. They just speak the truth, right? They bring it forward in us. There's another one. I don't think I want to read the whole thing, just being aware of time. I'll give you the page number and see if I can summarize it more briefly. It's page 71 and 72. And he talks about this 14-year-old boy who had come to Plum Village to practice. And one of the things he wanted to transform was anger, that his father had been very hard on him. And particularly when he'd make a mistake, he'd do something wrong or hurt himself, and his dad would be very harsh on him, like critical. And the 14-year-old boy was telling a story that he saw his sister fall, and that immediately what arose in him was that same harshness. That he wanted to say something mean to his sister. But because he'd been practicing, he'd been supported by family practice, he caught that, and he changed his behavior. Right? It's very profound, a 14-year-old boy to be able to have that degree of insight and then articulate it and see it. And Thich Nhat Hanh goes on to say, we usually think that parents have to nourish their children, but sometimes the children can bring enlightenment to the parents and help transform them. So this is a reciprocity piece to me. This is where being in right relationship, like elevating and amplifying the wisdom of children is not just for children, it's for all of us. I've been reading this book, Living Resistance by Caitlin Curtis. The subtitle is An Indigenous Vision for Seeking Wholeness Every Day. I highly recommend this book. And each section is a different, she calls it resistance practice. It's a different way to disrupt the status quo, to disrupt harmful cultural norms through our engaged practice, right? What we might call our engaged practice in this lineage or in Thich Nhat Hanh's lineage. And caring for children is one of the chapters, like caring for children as resistance practice, as resisting the status quo. And I want to say, like, through that practice, through that door, for me, it feels that that has given me this life where I've been able to see the magic in nature, to touch the acorn caps, and to feel there's something sacred here. To have lived with fairy tales and ancient myths and anime, to be carried into the realm of magic again and again, which feels like a liberatory door. We're doing koan study at Zen Center at Green Culture right now with the families. We have a program that meets every few months to look at the Layman Pang family koans with families. And you might know some of them, like the two that we've looked at so far, both feature the daughter, Lao Zhu, as the central teacher, as the person who's bringing the wisdom forward. And in one of those koans, she's walking with her father and he falls. And so she throws herself on the ground right next to him. And he says, "What are you doing?" And she says, "I saw you falling, so I'm helping." Just immediate, non-dual activity, compassionate action. She's just right there with him at his level. And we share this with the kiddos and they get it. They immediately understand this. And then another one we did back in April, it's the koan where the mother and father are arguing and one says, "Difficult, difficult." And the other one says, "Easy, easy." And Lao Zhu, the girl, says, "No,
Chelsea, sorry to interrupt, but we've lost sound. Can you hear me? We've lost sound.
Chelsea, there's no sound. Sorry. Oh dear. She can't hear us.
How about now? Yay.
Yay.
Okay. Yay.
Disaster averted.
That's all right. We got it. We got it. Okay. Well, now I got to do something. Okay. Okay, so we're expanding the children to be the collective body. Not just the children in our own care, but children that were held at the Mexico border under the Trump administration. Ooh, children that are currently being impacted by Florida's Don't Say Gay, or the new curriculum, if you're following what's happening over there, where now in the state of Florida, there's a new curriculum that teaches that the slaves benefited from slavery. Black people benefited from slavery. So can we bring those children into our circle of care? Or the LGBTQ two-spirit kiddos who are still, in more than half of our states, conversion therapy is legal. They're living with higher suicide rates, not able to have safety in their own homes. Millions of children living below the poverty level. I looked for some 12 children every day die from gun violence. Every day die from gun violence in this country. I think the count in Maui of children who died is almost 400, with at least 1,000 missing, unaccounted for. Lots going on in here today. Yeah. And I don't want to stop. I don't want to end without naming the countless children. I don't think we have numbers or could know the countless children who died and were harmed after being forcibly abducted into what we should be calling concentration camps in this country, the Native American boarding schools. And those children and their descendants are here in our communities. Maybe some of you have Indigenous ancestors or relatives. And that trauma hurts all beings. It's the collective body, and it's still right here, not so ancient, twisted karma that's here right now. So I want to be asking these hard questions to keep inviting more and more understanding and expanding this frame of what it is to be a person who cares for children. I want to take it out of the suburbs. I want it not to be relegated to women's work. It's all of our work to care for children. I wrote, this feels to me, it's like queering parenting. And I just feel a little bit delighted by that. Like, can we queer up our parenting? It's not just mom and dad, it's so much more. We could deconstruct that a little bit. Because what I think is happening, and I think I'm going to end with this, is it's like we relegate childcare into classrooms that have tall walls, sometimes security cameras and chain link fences. We relegate caring for children into the suburbs, and we relegate into this same sort of cut off, separate place into us, our own wounded inner child. And this comes back to, can we turn towards the avoided pain? Can we turn towards the grief and welcome it, and not isolate and separate these parts of ourselves and these parts of our communities, but welcome it forward into wholeness so it can flourish, so we can support one another and the collective body. This to me feels like where magic and aliveness becomes available again, not cutting off these parts of ourselves or our culture. And I think this is what Thich Nhat Hanh is teaching us when he says, take your inner child for a walk, invite them out to play. Let's not keep these parts of ourselves or of our communities and culture locked away, but let's bring it out into the light. Let's do it together. Let's give them a cookie. This is Joy Harjo, and I'll stop here with this quote. She says, call your spirit back. It may be caught in corners and creases of shame and judgment and human abuse. You must call in a way that your spirit will want to return. Speak to it as you would a beloved child. Call your spirit back. It may be caught in corners and creases of shame and judgment and human abuse. You must call in a way that your spirit will want to return. Speak to it as you would a beloved child. Yeah, so I'll stop there.